right. Hello, everybody. You are now listening slash watching Evolving the Conversation. And I am Melissa here with Nick.
Yo,
And
yo.
yeah, so let's get started.
Yeah, let's get started. Mention our sponsor, Young U Organics with the white sage smudge spray. That is, say that 10 times fast.
Shout out to
What?
Vika.
Yeah, shout out to Vika for creating this wonderful product, which I've got right here. That
And
smells
mine.
very pleasant.
I actually didn't spray any beforehand.
Smells very pleasant. Is something that is created by a shaman that has a few different plants in there, and yeah, it works great for just adding some pleasant smells to the room and for really connecting with the plants that are in the smudge spray itself, and really I've noticed definitely enhances dreams, which I've mentioned before.
Yeah, you spoke about that last time we talked about it,
Yeah,
that
just
it enhances your dreams.
does an
Yeah.
important thing to mention.
It specifically on the bottle mentions that it's for clearing energy and blessing the space. I think that's probably why I use it for a little bit of the clearing away the energy, and then also just as a reminder of, all right, I'm going to be intentional. I'm going to call on all the spirits that I like to work with every day. I'm going to invoke the sanctuary now. I like to do that more than one time a day.
Yeah, yeah. I use that probably multiple times a day. I use it before I leave the house and put it on me and have the spirits be working with me when I leave my house and take sanctuary from my room to the rest of the house, to the rest of the world.
Take it with you where you go.
Yeah, it's gonna be wherever I go.
Yeah, well, it is you, so it's gonna
Or
go
the
with you
key.
everywhere.
So yeah, definitely worth checking out this beautiful smudge spray, this beautiful medicine. Still working out the kinks of our commercials, but we're getting there.
I think that is
Yeah.
pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah, why not?
sure. So Melissa, we're gonna be talking about Siddhartha. We're
Yes, we are.
gonna be talking about Siddhartha, which we both read this book. It's called Siddhartha. It's written by Hermann Hesse, and it's about this guy. It doesn't exactly say how long he lived ago in the book, I don't think.
Hmm. I was just picturing a long, long, long time ago.
Yeah, it would be really good to just get like a reference of like, I wonder like exactly how long ago. Before Christ? I'm imagining before Christ, but then again, I don't exactly know.
Hmm. I'm not exactly sure, to be honest. Maybe just sometime around there. It was so far long ago that I don't know if it makes much of a difference if it was a little bit before, a little bit during, or a little bit after.
Very true, very true. And it's
Just
reminding
sometime in the past.
sometime in the past.
You don't have to get too caught up in the timeline of it all.
It's actually reminding me of this anime that I watched called Saint Young Men, and it's about Jesus Christ and the Buddha or
Hmm.
Siddhartha going and going to Japan for vacation.
Oh, that
It was
sounds
pretty good.
interesting.
It was pretty good. The ending was kind of odd, but it was pretty good.
That sounds
But
fun.
yeah, yeah. So
I wouldn't mind going on vacation to Japan or on vacation with Jesus and Buddha.
yeah, right. Those two would be fun to go on vacation with, especially to
Yeah.
Japan.
Yeah. Oh, you know what I did the other day, which was kind of fun? I did this little like visualization where I was imagining Jesus and Jesus was tending to my inner child. So I imagine Jesus like there when I was born and how happy he was, and then like holding me as a baby, and then I imagined him when I was like a little girl, like a little bit older, and then like my 5 year old self, and then I imagined us like as a teenager hanging out, and him, me and Jesus.
It's amazing how the divine ascended masters really are there with you for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, he says, right? Just ask me to teach you and I'll teach you. So why not take him up on the offer?
Yeah, take them up on the offer. And it's interesting too because Siddhartha does the same thing
Oh, does he?
for
Did,
sure.
did that happen in the book? You've read it multiple times, right? I've only read it the one time.
Yeah, I've read the book, and I also too really in shamanism like to work with Siddhartha directly by invoking him directly into the seven divine channels of color and really channeling that spirit and what it has to, or what Siddhartha has to really teach about unconditional compassion.
Mm.
And from my experience, both Siddhartha and Christ really are teaching about the same thing, but it's just in like a different flavor
Oh,
of
yeah, totally.
unconditional compassion, the spirit of Buddha and unconditional love and the spirit of Christ.
I agree as far as my
And
understanding goes.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, the spirit of Christ and the spirit of Buddha, they are really, spirits that I think when you get right to the essence of what they're teaching is just teaching how to be kind to yourself and others.
Yeah, I think about it as just that accepting, unconditional accepting and welcoming and embracing everything that arises. And things that we've talked about, especially recently, like it or don't like it, feels good or doesn't feel good,
Hmm.
positive or negative, blah blah blah. It's all the same, and it all gets to be there, and we get to love it all. I mean, I think that's the practice. It's not discriminating on the love. We're not closing, just being open to it all. And also
Yeah.
there's the understanding there, that shit happens or has happened, and we didn't get to where we are in a vacuum. Other things were in play.
Yeah. And having, you know, the compassion for understanding that, we're all just figuring this thing out as we go along.
Yeah. I mean, just my mom always says about kids raising children that there's no instruction manual. And I think that could be said for life in general. I mean, we're all just figuring stuff out. And it's also that, what we see is not exactly what you get, in a way of the way that we see things and the way that we take in information. It's not even all that's really there. And then we also have this idea of real versus unreal, or, we could debate about what a spirit is. So there's lots of kind of unseen things at play that kind of just get swept under the rug.
Yeah. And Buddha, the Buddha Siddhartha, I think Siddhartha definitely would say like with people that have, those types of paradigms to be compassionate for them too, because that's as far as their understandings have come so far. We're all just figuring this thing out and
Yeah, yeah, I think
just might
that's
not be the same
important.
timeline.
I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind.
The Brahmin's son.
So I'm curious, there's a lot of different versions of the book, right? Different translations.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, I've read the Barnes and Noble translation and then whatever this one I got from a used bookstore.
so, all right, maybe I was just a little bit confused about this. So the book is Siddhartha. Siddhartha was the actual Buddha. Is that accurate?
I, yeah,
But then
yeah.
the book that I read is about this Siddhartha who's not the Buddha, but I think it's kind of like
Interesting.
a story maybe about him coming to kind of the same realizations that the Buddha came from, but not by uh I don't know, is this right? The
I don't think
Buddha
there's a
like
right or
sat
wrong with
under the
it.
tree. No, but there is, I mean, the Buddha, Siddhartha, right? He sat under a tree. Is that what happened? And he meditated until he.
Maybe we got the same, maybe we got a different book. Did you get the
Yeah,
book where
I
it
was
starts out?
wondering if I didn't read the right
That'd be
book.
funny.
It said Siddhartha.
Uh, did you
All
read the
right.
book where it starts out chapter one, the Brahmin's son? That's chapter one.
I don't know. Well, no, the book is. I should have gotten the book before I.
You know what? I'm gonna let you borrow this book. I'm gonna let you borrow this book.
Well, just show me the one you have. Well,
Well, I don't this I've read this is the story that I read, and this is the
okay.
same story that was at Barnes and Nobles.
Okay. Okay. Why don't you talk for a minute or two? I'm gonna look it up and see if
Sure.
I. So, in the book that I read was about a. Hold on. Before I do that, let me pull up for me. Okay. So the story that I read was about a. I guess he was a wealthy man whenever he was living, boy, and he wanted to leave his house or leave his, his father's compound, leave his family and go searching for. He was always just searching. He was kind of always, I guess he has some level of like, I was gonna say discontent, but I don't think that's a word.
I don't know. That seems like an accurate word.
I mean, you know what I mean by that, right? I don't know if that's. I realize I always say, is that the right word?
That is the
Um,
same.
Yeah. So he was always kind of searching and trying to find something, seeking, longing for something. Till him and his best friend went to live with these Shiramans or something was the word. And they were kind of like one, I think maybe would the word be like an aesthetic, like they give up all their
Samanas.
possessions and they just meditate.
The samanas.
Okay, the samanas. And then he's kind of, he reaches a point there where he realizes like that isn't exactly what he was looking for either. And then they go and they actually find the Buddha. He
The
is giving
illustrious Buddha.
some talks or teachings, and he
Gotama.
realizes that like there was a thing here. There was a good point in there about the teacher. He realizes like no teacher is actually going to teach him anything, that he has to get what he's looking for from direct experience.
Yeah.
So
I would like to add too with that. Um, this is just my own interpretation, but of that part of the book where um him and his friend Govinda, Siddhartha and Govinda leave from the samanas and the aesthetic practice where they were essentially paupers and they would, live off of begging to go and hang out with the illustrious Buddha Gotama at his palace. Is that towards the end when Siddhartha was leaving the illustrious Buddha's palace, he came to a realization that for self-discovery, it requires the self, and really, other people could tell you about yourself, but you're the real one that knows all about yourself. And so he wanted to go and learn about himself directly.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that I think makes a lot of sense. And I think we see that in the shamanic practices where you only know what you know through direct experience.
Mm.
I think there's some value though to teaching.
Yeah, there's value to both.
I think the teaching kind of maybe helps you move in a direction that you might not otherwise be facing, or helps you to maybe open to a possibility which you can then go and experience for yourself.
Yeah, I would also like to add too, when we're talking about these people that, have really figured something out as far as awakening human consciousness and really ascending in human consciousness, um, that, you know, when we're talking about Siddhartha, he was just a person too, and he made a lot of mistakes too, and I think, perhaps when he left Gotama's palace and rejected all teachers, that was like a really one-sided commitment, because then, when he got when he left the palace and he met Kamala, and he really kind of like went total opposite of the aesthetic life, and
Mm,
was about like seeking pleasure. And that's really where you see a lot of the effigies of the fat jolly Buddha.
mm. Okay, so let's backtrack because I think that I did read the same book as you.
I think so.
So what I
Yeah.
was doing was just kind of rehashing the story. That way we could see if I read what you have read. And it
Yep.
sounds like we have because that was the next thing. After he leaves the teachings, he goes to the pleasure gardens and learns about love from Kamala.
Hmm.
And that was, I had talked to you about that one part because there was something that I, I, there was a teaching in there that I had realized for myself. So I thought that was interesting. And I'm still not exactly sure how this works. But in there it was he told Kamala actually about how to let your vision pull you. I don't know if I'm explaining that right. I mean, that's all I could really say about it. And I could explain how I understand that, I suppose might be helpful. So I had this understanding one night after one of my recent ayahuasca ceremonies about something that, one of my intentions for well, I've talked about this here too before, just my intention for, the evolution of my consciousness. And then I was kind of stuck in the how's it going to happen? Like weeding through the how do I actually do that? How do I make that work without getting caught up in all the other little bits and pieces of life? And so I was walking after the ceremony, and I realized, yeah, I have to let the intention pull me to it, and then that's the way that it happens. But I'm not quite sure how that actually I haven't yet really fully understood, or I guess integrated that, or to really know how that works. Do you have any insight into that?
You're talking about the part of the story where when Siddhartha goes to Kamala and they're talking, and Kamala goes, "Well, what can you do? What are your skills, Samana?" And Siddhartha responds with that Siddhartha can fast,
Mm-hmm.
can meditate, and wait.
Yes, yes, that's it. Thank you for being more prepared and specific. You really know this book. I was going to find the passage. Yeah. So fast is meaning like being disciplined.
Yes, fast meaning disciplined. I like that. Uh, yeah, that's it's exactly what it is. I mean, if you're gonna fast, you got to be disciplined with it.
Yeah.
That's your discipline. And then
Wait. Wait
wait,
is your
patience,
patience. And what's the third thing?
meditate.
Meditate. Yeah,
I
so
think
just like
being open,
being open, being present,
being present,
being aware.
awareness.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. I think though, I mean, do you think there has to be action in there? Because from what he's saying, there's no action. I don't know if the waiting,
And perhaps too, I mean, like, in what I mean, okay, I'll speak from personal experience, like what I was originally taught by meditation of like go sit in, like a lotus pose and like like this very, very limited understanding of meditation. Perhaps, when Siddhartha was really living this out, meditation, perhaps had a different and maybe deeper meaning for Siddhartha of, in the sense where I think we've discussed this before, and you mentioned that meditating is, the doing, even if that's thinking.
the
And so
awareness
perhaps,
of
yeah, the awareness of like as you're going through, um, living that just the meditation and being aware of it and present, you know, and focusing on what's going on around you.
yeah, I could see how they both have their value, and I could see how maybe one you would personally, sometimes you would want more than the other, right? Like the quote unquote spiritual experience of being, I don't know, what comes to mind is like a monk surrounded by other monks who are all just doing their spiritual duties, meditating all day long, praying all day long, being at the Blue Morpho Lodge and just doing, meditating, praying, doing your medicine. There's that. But then you think about what practical application does that actually have to a life? And is that any more spiritual than exactly what you just referenced? Being present in your everyday life. And then going back to what we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, the awareness, acceptance, embracing it all, being present with it all, and moving through it. I mean, they both have their value and their place, but is one any more spiritual
I don't think
than
so.
the other?
And
Yeah, certainly not. I mean,
I
one
would
may be
also add,
more preferable, you know. One's
yeah,
like
there are
a lot
preferences.
easier. It's a lot easier to do the practice when there's nothing to practice with.
Yeah, there are preferences. I mean, I know I've got mine.
Of course. I mean, it's so much easier to be spiritual surrounded by a bunch of people who are doing the exact same work you're doing and who all kind of have the same, maybe we're not all headed in the exact same direction, but we're all kind of on the same road or the same
Yeah.
the same highway or on the same vehicle, but kind of what you said before, having patience for the people who are nowhere near or have any desire to be doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, actually too, that really brings up a lot of what I've been working on recently, just as far as the mental training of shamanism goes, and really the mental training of really practicing the tenets of sanctuary is, when looking at people who are just like don't really, care perhaps about their own well-being, or they just can't really see through the illusions that certain aspects of society creates, is that, they're not wrong for it. There's no right or wrong with it. It's just, I think, a matter of, you know, uh, of like tuning in, tuning into, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say essentially that, the people who might be on a different path, that's completely okay. And I mean, you know, uh, they're just not wrong for being on whatever path that they're on. It's just, again, going back to preference.
Yeah. Yeah, we can't expect everybody to be interested in what we're interested in. I mean, there's how many people now? 7 billion? Probably 8 billion at this point. People that live on the earth. Not everyone's going to have the same interests or the same values or,
Yeah, yeah,
too, I was thinking about this today, even the same motivations. And I think kind of like what you were referring to about the maybe not seeing through the illusions. There's a lot out there, what are you motivated by? Are you motivated by the fear or the worry and I have to do all these things because I have to keep all this other stuff from happening? Or are you doing the things that you want to be doing because of some other like drive or desire or motivation? But I think also then involved in that, as I'm saying that, there's privilege and all other kinds of things.
it's very complex.
Yeah, totally. I mean, just like all of life. But, and also going back to that, I think that is kind of what we're talking about, or what the whole passage in the book was about, right? Letting that desire or that outcome pull you, as opposed to doing all this other stuff to kind of avoid or run away from, with the worry or the fear.
Yeah, there's two things I'd like to add to that. Is the number one is number one is when we were talking about preferences and relating it to Siddhartha and really the teachings of Siddhartha in this story is, you know, the first chapter, the Brahmin's son. From what I understand, a Brahmin was essentially, like a certain class within Siddhartha's culture, where it was essentially like priesthood, or someone who's like, um, a person who studies essentially,
And he was like a high
for a living,
class.
a high class like
Yeah, like a lot of privilege.
teacher, professor maybe would be, I don't know, equivalent to what we have in our culture and society. Um, and where Siddhartha went to his father and he said that he needs his father's blessing to go and become a samana. And his father didn't give him his blessing right away, but Siddhartha stood there until his father gave him the
Mm.
blessing. And,
Hmm.
like I think like a whole night went by and Siddhartha was still standing there. And, you know, like I guess in protest of like, I'm gonna stand here until you give me your blessing, father. And then, finally his father uh came to him and said, you have my blessing, son, and if you find something that works for you in this, please let me know. And then Siddhartha, went off and became a samana. And it just reminds me of what we were talking about as far as preference of, the father, perhaps he, was just figuring things out as he was going along and saw the path of the Brahmin as, the path that was leading him to answers. And Siddhartha just thought that there might be something more out there that he didn't know and wanted to discover. And so he let that vision pull him, in your words.
Mm,
And the
yeah.
second thing is, what was I don't remember.
Well, I certainly don't know your second point. I think too, maybe the way obviously I don't know what his dad had in mind, but I think it relates to what we are talking about too. The dad may have looked down on what he wanted to do. Because I think at that time too, the caste system was very prejudiced. And so why would you want to go do something that's below you?
Yeah.
Why would you want to give up all that you have?
Yeah, I mean, rationally, as far as, perhaps things weren't exactly different then as we like to think, and perhaps still that part of the human psychology is still definitely like uh, has its effects even today of, rationally, if you would look at like what is defined as success consensusly is, having a a position in society that is like based on a tier list and trying to get to a high level. And I mean, if you were already born into a certain class, logically, perhaps that father was looking at it as like, why would you ever even want to do that? Actually, like, thank you for bringing that up because it brings about a deeper understanding of the story.
Yeah. And I think the point kind of speaks to what we were talking about in that we can never really understand, unless you know it, someone else's motivations, and one thing isn't necessarily better than the other, it's just different. And really being able to step back from that and just allow everyone's perspective and allow everyone to be where they are and motivated by what they're motivated, what their motivations are. I think it's okay though also to point out, maybe especially in this day and age, what are those motivations? Only because there are so many, like you say, illusions and delusions, and I think things at play that are maybe trying to move us in a direction that maybe isn't such a healthy direction. I don't know, maybe that's just a judgment on my part.
I don't think so. I think really, what you're talking about is when you're saying about letting the vision pull you of what your true desires are, I think a true desire for everyone is to live compassionately, live kindly. Like, I don't really know people who, when you really get to the heart, that say like they want to be mean to people. Like the heart knows kindness and wants to spread kindness. I think that's a real true desire. I think the brain can sort of cut off from the heart, and then, you could be completely brain dominant. And that's where, the illusions and the delusions, I would think, would come in to try to steer you away from that path of what the true desires really are. And I mean, it just really reminds me of actually Siddhartha, of just like that true desire to, you know, just be kind to other people. I mean, in the book, you know, uh, is written that he's kind to, all these people that he meets throughout this whole entire story. And I'd like to add that when I got to the end of the book, I saw it as the characters of this book all of them were in a sense of Buddha. All of them had this Buddhic consciousness, and it was about really, this group of people, and each character in the story really was, actually like really kind to each other. Like even going from, when Siddhartha met Kamala, and Kamala was like, "Yo, you need to like go and participate within society and get a job, and I'm gonna hook you up with my friend the Swami. What's his name? I forget his name.
I don't know what.
It's something Swami. It's where
The
it's
businessman?
the businessman, the Swami, right? And so then Kamala, arranges this meeting and says to Siddhartha, which is actually like a really interesting kind of thing of like a manipulative woman, but a manipulative woman in like a very kind-hearted kind of way of like saying like, I want you to become, I forget this guy's name.
Well, I think also she was saying if I'm gonna teach you and you're gonna be in my circle, you have to shave your beard, you have to clean up,
Yup.
you have to get clothes, you just have to be the part.
Yeah. Yeah. And saying to that she wants Siddhartha to be what's the guy, the businessman's equal. Trying to find that guy's name. I forget. And but even all of that, I mean, it, you know, it seems within all of that content of the story, Kamala was like, oh, okay, I see this guy, I want to help this guy out. I'm gonna be kind to this guy. Like arranged all of these things and like, like went out of her way or not went out of her way, but decided to actually, put into action um, mm, getting a meeting together with the businessman. And, then from there, Siddhartha had, a many-year relationship with this person and, really decided to dig in into the pleasures of life and became very wealthy and lived with Kamala.
Yeah, this was the part of the book where he almost it's as if he looked down on the people who were involved in this kind of game, the business
Mm,
world and the pleasure
yeah.
world and the world of the children, he called it. Well, that's at least in the translation that I was reading, where almost you were driven by those pleasures or the like or dislike or the gain or loss, more more in the duality of it all, right? In the I like this, I'm going to move towards that, or I don't like that, I'm going to move away from that.
Yeah,
And he
let's not
kind of
forget the
looked
part.
yeah, he kind of
Sorry.
looked down on it on that lifestyle a little bit, even though it did become what he became.
Yeah, I was about to say, let's not forget that Siddhartha would gamble all of his money, not just a little bit, all of his
Well, he
money.
had a lot of money to gamble. He became wealthy.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, when he decided to, leave that all and, his life as a wealthy businessman and Kamala and his business partner to who knows? I mean, I don't think he really fully knew at that point when he left that uh, you know, he was going to become a ferryman. I think he kind of just, seemed to be like he was despairing of all of that because I mean, you know, if it just seems a very hollow goal of like, okay, I just want to increase my bank account number to X number, but like not have the like the reason for like why are you trying to get all of that? Just like okay, these are like the material things, and this really going to lead me to inner fulfillment?
Yeah, I think he felt the emptiness in that lifestyle. Although also he was always, again, going back to that, whether this word is a real word, he always had that kind of inner discontent that
That's
was
definitely a real word. I love that. No, that
that was
describes him
moving
well.
that was moving him from place to place, right? So he left home, he left the whatever sharama, whatever they're called,
Samana.
samana. I think they were called something different in my translation.
No,
And
maybe.
then he left the Buddha, and then he left Kamala.
Yeah, I mean, this is the patterning that you see throughout his life. Is like, even from when he left his home as a Brahmin son, and just, saw that the, I think it seems what happened was, he saw through certain illusions and saw his own delusions, freaked out and ran away. And
Hmm.
it's just kind of like a patterning that happens again and again with the samanas, with the illustrious Buddha, with Kamala.
It's that he's looking for something. It's kind of, again, this like, it's like almost like a longing or a craving or a desire that's not fulfilled. And he realizes how he's trying to fulfill this thing inside is not being fulfilled by the thing that he's doing. It reminds me of the book The Prodigal Son, which is a book by Henry Nouwen, and he's a spiritual leader. And so in the book The Prodigal Son, it's about that one of the parables that Jesus talks about, the prodigal son. And then also there was a painting that it was a famous painter, I forget his name, painted. And Henry Nouwen became obsessed with the painting and he got to see it in real life and was studying it. And so then he wrote a book about about the story. And so the story is that there's and I think I actually might have talked about this on this podcast before. There's the father who's a rich landowner, and then there are two sons. And so one son asks the father if he could have his inheritance. And the father says yes. And so the son leaves and he goes and spends all the money. He goes and sees what there is to see. And then he loses all the money. And the economy takes a turn and he loses the money. And he realizes that he is so low that he is trying to steal food from the animals. And he thinks, I could just go home and be fed the scraps of the animals that my father has. So I'm going to go home and just beg from my dad to, treat me the way I'm being treated. But when he goes home, the father is just beyond thrilled to see him. He, runs out to the road and says, get him the robes, get him the shoes, let's have a party. He just celebrates that he's back. And so then there's the other brother who had stayed the entire time. And the other brother is so jealous. He's, why are you treating my brother this way? He left, he spent all the money. And the father says, everything I have, everything I own is yours. He's no better than you are this entire time. Like you've had all of mine is yours. And so really what's underneath this is that so the son who left is looking for something. What is he looking for? He's looking for God. And he goes and finds it. Like he goes searching for it, but it turns out like it was really with him all the time, or it was even at the home that he goes home to get. And then the other son who's home, it's there all along, but he doesn't see it. And then the dad who, loves the son who squanders everything, and then but also loves the son who is so jealous and is also God. So I don't know if I'm making a clear point here or not, but it kind of just reminds me of the son that goes searching for this thing that's actually with him the entire time. You know, whether or not you go searching or you stayed home, like the other brother that didn't leave, like they were always with God, or God was always with them, whether you're looking for it or not. I mean, and I think that's almost, that's kind of what Siddhartha realizes at the end in a way. Maybe it's not that it's God, but it's just that this thing is inside of you, this ability to just be accepting and with and still and loving and kind to whatever arises. I don't know if that was a clear point or not.
I think it was. I
Okay.
think it was for sure, especially too around relating it to Siddhartha of just that consistent, just that consistent compassion too. And I think really where he finds that for himself is after he decided to leave Kamala and he was wandering along the river and he was just in really a state of despair and just looking for some kind of meaning from something. And he decided that, he's gonna hop in the river and take his own life. And so he hopped into the river and sunk down to the bottom. And I think that's, it's literal in the sense, but like also a metaphor of like sinking to the bottom, of that river of despair and getting to the bottom and just having enough compassion for himself to wake up out of it and not want to ultimately harm himself and take his own life. And he rises back up to the surface and goes off to the side and passes out. And then when he wakes back up, he's he sees some bananas next to him and a monk that was watching over him while he slept. And when he realized who that monk was immediately, he realized that it was his old friend. How do we say his name again? Govinda?
Govinda?
Yeah, Govinda. Well, it's funny because Govinda didn't realize that it was Siddhartha at first because Siddhartha had gotten fat and bald. And in the book they talk about Siddhartha when he was a young man was very handsome and stout and and yeah, I was really just that was a super impactful part of the story for me, just being aware of really, what this spirit of the Buddha, Siddhartha, has to teach really about self-compassion too, about really, I don't think anyone really escapes the, creating delusions in the mind based off of the illusions that is societal. And those societal illusions really are just like the collective illusions that get propagated over and over. I don't, and, you know, to stop freaking out about all of that and come to your senses to just continue on with the journey forward. And it was really, um, when Siddhartha came to it with Govinda there, I think it was a really special moment for him to just like realize that, what you call it, whatever you call it, divine intelligence, God, the universe, source, even, he could even apply sanctuary to this of, really having a safe space. I mean, Govinda was watching over him. They lived in a
Mm.
jungle area, but of just having that friendship with someone and just to like realize that God or the universe or just this divine intelligence ultimately really does care about you.
Yeah. And I think a point there is that, you said you come to your senses. I think that's an interesting thing because it's really coming to yourself. And that's where you're going to find all of these things that you're looking for. Like that's where the divinity is. That's where the connection is happening, and not necessarily in just the brain or the mind, but like in all of you.
The whole body,
Yeah, the whole body.
yeah,
And then I think
receiving
it
this.
comes back to that compassion, which is I saw the compassion in the heart as the fuel. Like that's
Mm,
what sustains you. It's almost like a endless cycle. And without that,
you're
you're kind
just
of,
completely mind dominant without it.
yeah, and kind of empty. And again, then wait, what are you looking for? You're looking for that thing you feel attached to outside of yourself, which
Mm,
ultimately doesn't really bring you the fulfillment that you're
mm.
actually looking for. When it
Yeah,
is just, it is, yeah, finding that connection inside of yourself.
that's beautiful. And actually, when I flipped to the book, that chapter is actually called Samsara, I think. Well, no, what's the next chapter? Uh, yeah, the Samsara, where, he uh, is that cycle of suffering, and then,
Mm,
ending that cycle of suffering. And yeah, what you mentioned too about, looking for that external source and understanding like there's the external sources, but the internal source, is of the same thing, is of the same divinity as all of those external sources too.
yeah, really, really, that's one thing I've been understanding deeper and deeper is that it is such an inside job. Like you have to find that peace inside of yourself, as annoying as that may be. But also, I mean, I guess that's the good news because then you are in charge of it. You are responsible for it, and it doesn't have to be something that, like, I mean, I don't know. There's work to be done to find it inside of yourself too.
It's not easy.
No, certainly not.
It's definitely not easy.
But at least you're relying on yourself rather than something outside that may or may not, or could or could not, or and thinking about it too, that's what's really going to change something because it is only when the inside changes that the outside changes.
Yeah, when the relationship you have inside yourself changes with yourself, then, you know, the relationship you have with those outside things changes as well.
Yeah.
And I think really, when the relationship changes with inside yourself that is based in truth and clarity, really around just the heart's true desire to really be kind and compassionate and loving with one another. And I think that really, changes things, with inside yourself of, like your heart's true desire is to be kind to yourself and to be compassionate with yourself and to be unconditionally loving with yourself. And so, you show yourself that you know, you're already capable of it. You just have to really attune to the heart and get the brain to align with the heart and then really retrain the brain to start thinking, all of those kind thoughts and repatterning the brain and training the brain. And that's not an easy task, but then, giving that to yourself, you then really are in a position to be able to give that to other people.
Agree.
I think that's really too relating it to the teachings of Siddhartha, where the story turns of Siddhartha the Ferryman starts to happen, where he apprentices with the old guy. What's the old guy's name?
Oh, I definitely don't know.
It's in here. Is it Gotama? No, that was the illustrious. Gotama was the illustrious Buddha. Let's see. Ah, Vasudeva.
Hmm.
Yeah. And starts to learn from Vasudeva, and Vasudeva would just, tell him to listen to the river. Go listen to nature. Uh, yeah, Vasudeva. And so from there, yeah, Siddhartha, started to apprentice as a ferryman with Vasudeva and started to really just deal with people from all walks of life, just trying to get across the river
Yeah. And he also started interacting with the river,
and
listening
learning
to the river,
directly.
learning from the river. And that's eventually, I mean, this is where the story comes to a close, eventually.
Eventually.
But this is where he came to his enlightenment, let's say.
This is, where he came to a certain enlightenment of, you know, uh, being in connection with, the simplicity of what really brings you joy, really life's simple joys. And, getting to witness a amazing sunset and a sunrise, and hanging out with a friend and building a garden, and, connecting with the earth and really, just having the earth be having the recognition that the earth is really what's nourishing you. And I would also like to add too, like, even Siddhartha, though, when he became a ferryman and started to, live much more simply, that it's not like, the problems and the challenges that, life creates didn't stop coming to him. I think on the contrary, I just think he learned some, things to be able to better deal with it.
I think
And
it's reframing them too.
yeah, reframing in a better way, perhaps.
Yeah. Did this happen in the book or am I making it up? That it's not that it's a problem. I might be making this up. Maybe this happened in something else. Like looking for the being the solution instead of being the problem. Is this something
I
else
think,
just came up
like
for
that, I
me?
think that's like an underlying theme. It might not
Okay.
be like that might be paraphrasing it, but yeah, yeah. I definitely I definitely know Siddhartha was one for seeking solutions.
I might just be confusing that with something else.
I'm sure it's an underlying theme somewhere in this book. But yeah, I mean, and then, when Kamala decided to go and visit the illustrious Buddha
Mm-hmm.
Gotama uh, at his, I think he was like either about to pass on and she wanted to
Yeah.
visit him before
Hmm.
that he passed on to receive his teachings. And so Kamala decided to bring her son with, who was actually Siddhartha's son, which I always question, like, did he realize that she was pregnant and just freak out and run away? Or like, was that just
Mm.
all like after the math, he didn't know? doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean,
But
they didn't mention either way in the book. It didn't sound
they
like that's
didn't.
why he ran away. But yeah, who knows? The way
Yeah,
I mean, things had changed for him because he had been at the river for a while. But the way that he embraced the sun didn't make it seem like it would have been something he was running away from.
true. Very true. You never really know.
But I don't
And
know.
but I like to think that he didn't
Hmm.
know. But but she brought yeah, she brought little Siddhartha, I forget the son's name, with and and she heard about, two older ferrymans that many of the people regarded as sages. And during that journey to try to get to Gotama, she was bitten by a poisonous snake. We read the same book, right?
Mhm.
Okay, just making sure.
At this point, I think we've
Yeah.
come to that conclusion.
Well, yeah, you never know what kind of translations there are,
That's true. That's true.
but yeah, and so um, Vasudeva, do I have this correct? Vasudeva actually came to her aid and brought Kamala and the son to one of the huts
Hmm.
when Siddhartha was out working. And when he came back, he realized that the person laying there was Kamala. And um, yeah, I'm trying to think now.
Well, they couldn't save her,
They couldn't save her, no.
but then he tried to have the son stay with him. But the son wasn't happy with that life because he was used to living a finer life
Mm,
in the pleasure garden and not so simple, living a
yeah,
life of more material possessions. And he was very
yeah.
dissatisfied. So that's where Siddhartha saw the parallels between him and his son, and then him as a son and his father, because he wanted to leave the life that his father thought was. He wanted to leave the life his father had given him, and his father couldn't understand why he wouldn't want this life. And it was almost, he realized what his father had gone through, and then he also realized that he was going through the same thing, the same
Mm,
experience that his father had had.
yeah,
And right,
well
he also
put.
couldn't understand why the son wouldn't want that life, to be with this father that loves you, the simple life.
Yeah, because Siddhartha actually was really, really a kind father.
Yeah, and the boy didn't understand why. Right, I think the boy had a hard time receiving the kindness,
Yeah, yeah,
and he eventually just ran away.
and he eventually just ran away. And Siddhartha went to go look for him, and he walked through the forest, and he got to the town, and didn't he decide to then just turn back once he got to the town?
I don't remember exactly how it happened. I know they didn't see each other again. He didn't find him.
He didn't find him, no. And I think I remember too. It gets brought up when Siddhartha was talking about this, where he remembered that after he left his father's house, that he never saw his father again either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and Vasudeva, told him to just really let the son go and figure out his own path. If, he was really dissatisfied with, being around Siddhartha and living this simple life, and he, you know, wanted to go find his own path and find out more.
He had told him that before he left too, but Siddhartha was unwilling at that point to do that.
Yeah, yeah. And it just goes to show you just like how all of the same emotions, are present even with these, you know, uh, great teachers.
Right, like just because you have some wisdom under your belt doesn't mean you don't folly.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean it's even stated too. Siddhartha saying like how incredibly jealous he was when he would go into town and look at all of these parents who had their kids, and he would wonder like why, would the universe like give him this set of circumstances where, he can't, be around his son, and his son just ran away and everything that had happened, which
That's
is like really deep and sad.
yeah, I know. I can't imagine that because at this point, my children, they realize they cannot leave me because they would not survive, and I think they know
Uh,
that.
that's funny.
So they're not going anywhere. But yeah, I
Uh,
can't imagine what it's like. I mean, I think you just have to be able to let them go and do as they wish.
I would imagine that would be hard. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not a parent. I wouldn't know, but I would imagine that'd probably be a challenge.
Yeah, I imagine it to be a challenge. But I think it's natural as well. Maybe it's different now than it was then. Maybe your children lived with you, like generations lived with each other. And
Mm,
so it was maybe more unusual for children to leave, whereas now you think about it's probably pretty standard. Kids go to college or families just don't live in the same place or they go and extended family isn't necessarily living together. I mean, maybe it's happening or maybe it's like a renaissance, not necessarily a renaissance, but a resurgence, maybe more now so out of necessity as it was then, because of cost of living or things like that that are happening these days.
yeah. And I think, this really brings about the theme of attachment.
Yeah, totally.
And, they like you hear a lot like within like, uh people who are like really into the religion of of Buddhism. We talk about non-attachment
Hmm.
and these types of things. But I mean, I think that's something that, Siddhartha learned, but it wasn't always like, oh, I'm just gonna be unattached. It was more like, oh my God, I'm so attached to this thing. And just like, oh, it hurts so much emotionally. And then, little by little releasing those attachments with the understanding, of real compassion for people like his son, of just like his son was really, really dissatisfied with, living with him when, his son was just, pretty much out for like a little journey to go with his mom, and just like everything ended. His mother, was killed by a snake, and like such a massive transformation so
Yeah.
fast.
And he never got to return to the life that he had when there were probably other people there that he associated with that he loved. And here he was with
Yeah.
these two old men,
Yeah.
poor, simple. Like, who are
Poor,
they? Why would he want
simple.
to be hanging out with them? He has nothing in common with
Right.
them.
Right. And I think, you know, with the help of Vasudeva, uh, to really help Siddhartha awaken to those truths and help him, you know, I think it's important to say like when you release attachments with someone, it doesn't mean that you don't love them. It just means that, you set them free and you don't try to manipulate them in any kind of way or control them in any kind of way.
Yeah. Or I think also, too, seeing something from someone else's perspective is really important.
Mm,
Understanding that they have a way of being, seeing, wanting, desiring, needing that might not be in alignment with what you want. or maybe that you don't even know of. I mean, had Siddhartha even asked his son any of that stuff?
Good point.
I don't think they even had those conversations. I know that it didn't sound like they had a friendly relationship. The son was very hostile and bitter,
Yeah, it
and
seemed to
not
start
in
off
a
really
way
mean.
that's, judgmental. Like all the things you just said. The mom, he was going on a trip, the mom died, and now he's stuck in the forest with these old men.
Yeah. Yeah, and
And
I
no
think
one
it
ever asked him what he wanted.
yeah, I think it go and then it goes really back to the principle of compassion of, as you said, like really giving it your best to understand where this person is coming from, given their circumstances. Like, no wonder he would be angry. And I think
Mm.
Siddhartha really understood that too. Like, this kid's angry for a reason. Look at all of what transpired, you know,
Well,
in a short amount of time.
I think he needed Vasuda to help him see that, didn't he?
Yeah, I was saying like after
Oh,
Vasudeva,
afterwards. Okay,
sorry,
okay.
yeah, I
Yeah.
meant like after Vasudeva really, helped him um see another way of looking at it. It just goes, like I said, back to that principle of compassion and like what you're saying about like putting yourself in someone else's shoes.
Yeah. Something you said reminded me of something that we always talked about with Dr. Sam. And I think this goes back to, like thinking you're like enlightened or and that you don't experience ever, you're never going to experience maybe pain or loss or jealousy or attachment. And I don't think that's ever really going to be the case, but I think it's a matter of maybe having, awareness of when these things happen. It's almost like if you're, if you're of a certain, whatever, if you want to call it a certain consciousness or right, enlightened, that you're never going to have an attachment or you're never going to be triggered or you're never going to be jealous. And I don't think that's ever the case. I think it's a matter of noticing, right? Maybe having the awareness sooner and then being able to come back to, oh, okay, I see what was happening there.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there, where I don't think those things then cease to exist. It's just bringing the awareness, is being aware of when you're, perhaps creating those attachments, or you're creating the jealousy, or you're creating the anger. And, just giving
Or
it
the
your best not
Tao.
to, or the Tao, and just like giving it your best not to be in a reactionary state with those
Yeah.
types of energies and those types of things. And then where the practices come in of being able to then release those types of energies of like the doubt or the jealousy or the anger and the sadness.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with having any of that. And then I think there's that compassion too. I think the compassion is so helpful when you encounter any of those things to you have to have the love for the part of yourself that's still experiencing that.
Yeah, I mean,
And then I think that love really does help for it to kind of be transmuted faster versus that, oh no, I can't be that way.
yeah,
I'm this thing, I'm not that thing. No, you're everything.
yeah. That's a beautiful way of putting it too, of just like showing those aspects of of your self-love, and so that you can really, change in the presence of divinity into, a more patient and compassionate person. And just really just evolving in the deepening of those qualities.
Yeah, I guess all these things could be like those shadowy aspects, right? Like the
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that.
I'm not that thing.
Uh,
Okay.
totally are.
I caught you.
It's funny.
I caught you being a shadow.
Uh, I was gonna say something. What was I gonna say? I was gonna say, man, what was I gonna say?
I don't know.
It was about the, it was about the
The compassion.
Yeah, but no, I forget. Anyway, maybe it'll
Well,
ping
just have
back up in my
compassion
memory
for the
for my
forgetful part of
for my
yourself.
blank right now.
Yeah, all
Yeah.
good.
It was something good, damn it.
Oh no.
Oh well.
I had something good to say.
Oh, all right. So, yeah, I was saying but these things though that, you call or, have been called like the shadow aspects of yourself, like the jealousy or the attachments, or like my anger and my shadow and all of that, like that is the human condition. And, these humans, Siddhartha being one of them, who really is a divine ascended maestro, meaning, he teaches humanity how to ascend in consciousness. And he teaches that by teaching compassion. And that's really how you ascend in consciousness, just uh, really number one, giving yourself compassion for just going through this human condition. There's one set way of doing it, and we're all figuring it out as we go along. I always thought that was a really powerful teaching of Siddhartha.
Yeah, and also he has these aspects of himself too that are shadowy, and he
Yeah,
still
totally.
is a defined divine ascended master.
Yeah. And I think that's because he puts those teachings for himself into practice.
Yeah, I
You
mean that's
know,
what it's all about. And then again, that's where you stop the suffering, where you stop denying that you have these parts and you just get on board with loving them and accepting them and understanding them and just incorporating them.
yeah, what have we said? Your shadow needs more love,
Yeah.
not less.
Yeah, everything needs more love, not less. Shout out to Matt Kahn because I did not invent that, but I got it from
Yeah,
reading the book.
well,
I
that's
think it's
it's a
called
good
like
saying.
whatever arises, love that. And the main thing is that when you feel bad or wrong or, guilty or shame or whatever, that's when you need more love.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're bringing it to a close too within the book of,
Mhm.
where Vasudeva pretty much just says, "All right, I'm going off into the woods. Peace out, Siddhartha. It's been real."
Yeah,
And goes off into the woods, and who knows? Did he go off into the woods to pass on? And I think that's kind of really where that part of the story led, although it doesn't exactly say.
maybe he went the way of Jesus,
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
rose off somewhere,
Yeah,
or is
yeah. Oh,
buried
okay.
somewhere.
Yeah, I get what you meant. I get you
Or
now.
he's buried somewhere. But then the friend comes back, right?
Yeah.
Govinda.
Govinda, yeah,
Govinda. And
Govinda.
he's still searching.
And he's still searching,
But he
right?
realizes that Siddhartha seems like he's not searching anymore. So he asks Siddhartha to, what could you share with me?
Oh, that's such a beautiful moment of the book too. Yes, when he asked Siddhartha, because Siddhartha was giving him a lift on his ferry, and
Mm.
he asked Siddhartha, like, please teach me, like, what can you teach me? And he just gives him a kiss on the forehead.
Well, I think at first, doesn't he explains it to him verbally.
Yeah. Yeah, what does
And
he explain to him
Govinda
though?
just had no idea what he was talking. He didn't understand.
Ah, that's right. And he
He
was
had to
talking about
show him.
the eternal Om. Was that? I think so. Was
I
that the
don't know
ending?
if that's when he talked about the
Yeah, maybe not, but
I forget what the text was, but he did not understand the verbal teaching.
no, he didn't. And that's when he gave him the kiss on the forehead.
Yeah, so then he transmitted the knowledge to him.
Yeah, and then they both went on their own way. But I think that parting goodbye was just like this, you know, as I was saying, when you get really, really down to the essence of the teaching. It's just a pure kindness and pure compassion. And it's just so beautiful. I love that story.
I think it's interesting because there was the part again where Siddhartha said, forget the teacher. But I think again it highlights that importance of having someone else that can show you what's possible.
Yeah, and also too, it just reminds me of, you know, in shamanism of, working and communicating and building relationships with spirits. Well, one of those spirits is the spirit of compassion. That is an energy. That is a life force energy. And, the spirit of compassion can teach you many things. And it's not just, uh, another human being teaching you that, although it can be, but it takes on many, many forms. It could be like, oh, like you're hanging out in your house and like your roommate has a cat and the roommate's cat's there and you're just like, oh, hey, just sending you some love, give it a little pat on the head and continue about your day. So, you know.
So the teacher can take many forms.
Yeah, the teacher can take many forms. And, I think, when you learn directly from spirits themselves, especially the spirit of compassion, it could take on many, many forms in the form of a book, in the form of a conversation, in the form of many things.
That's a good way to look at life.
Well, I just kind of came to that understanding. So
Mm.
thanks for this conversation.
Yeah, it was good to read the book and then talk about it in this way.
Yeah, you were actually like the first person that I really like talked to as far as a deep dive of this book goes.
Mm.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, I agree. Well, you know better than I do, even though I just freshly read it.
Yeah, I didn't freshly read it. I read it maybe about like 6 months ago. I try to read it
Mm.
like once a year or so. I don't know. It's just like every time I read it, I get something new from it.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, I'm glad I read the right book because I was a little bit worried there at first.
Yeah. Yeah, no. Yeah. You got the right book. We're on the same page,
All
literally.
right, clearly on the same page
Yeah. Well,
of the
everyone,
same book.
of the same book. We are on the same page. Well, everyone, this has been a really fun podcast for me, talking
I
about this
agree.
book. I really, really enjoy that story a lot. So thank you, Melissa, for actually reading the book too, and yeah, and just having the willingness to get onto this podcast and talk about it. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me
And if
into
yeah,
reading the book. One of the first books that I've
yeah,
actually finished in quite a while. I have the tendency to read and not finish.
something worked there. All right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, I also finished listening to another audio. Well, I finished an audio book just yesterday too, so maybe I'm on a roll.
Keep it going.
Yeah.
Thank you to each of you listeners for coming this far. If you've got this far into our conversation, and if you, like this episode and you like our podcast, subscribe, hit the thumbs up. If you have any kind of comment, or if you've read this book and you have knowledge about Siddhartha and about the spirit of compassion or anything really, just drop a comment.
If you know anything about
If you
anything,
know anything about anything, if you
leave a
have a
comment.
pulse, leave a comment and a like.
If you
Get
have a
my
thought in your
ratings up a
brain.
little bit. If you can click a mouse or a phone. Yes.
That reminds me, yesterday,
Like my
James.
shit.
Yesterday, James, he's in kindergarten, so he knows how to write letters, but he wrote a bunch of letters on a paper. He's like, "What did I write?" I'm like, I don't know, James. What did you
Gibberish.
write? What was your intention there, James? I don't know.
That's funny.
You tell me, buddy.
Yeah. Did he say anything? Like,
No, I don't think he knew what
uh,
he wrote.
it's funny.
Yeah.
Be a kid and just scribble down anything.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm like, is that the right word? So silly.
Uh,
Compassion for that
yeah.
part of me that someone told had to be right.
Oh, same here. You and I suffer the same thing.
I know. Many of us do. Many of us do. The illusion that there's the right or the wrong.
Yeah. And then really that like mental prison that you always have to be right.
Or don't want to be wrong.
Don't want to be fear.
Yeah,
Don't
fear of
want to be
being
wrong. The
wrong.
fear of being wrong. Well, I mean, this conversation today, in our sanctuary has really helped me turn down and off the fear, especially with the help of Siddhartha
Yeah, just
of
have compassion
learning
for the
compassion.
fear. It's not,
Mm.
it's not like you're creating it by yourself.
No,
There's certainly a lot of help out there. A lot of
certainly
things.
a lot of seeds that have been planted that perhaps were not for our greatest good. And I think that's
Wow.
really, why we, invoke these spirits that are much bigger than ourselves, like the spirit of compassion and Siddhartha, Jesus Christ, to help
And all the
move those
people that walk
energies.
in their footsteps.
All of the people that walk in their footsteps, many people that are divine ascended masters that you don't even know their name. So many. So many, and they could all really help, move those seeds of fear and really plant seeds that are really based in love and kindness and compassion and even love towards the fear, like you say, and compassion towards the fear. So it doesn't have to be fearful anymore and can really, evolve into, something different that's not fearful.
Yeah. We were in the middle of saying goodbye. We got sidetracked.
We did. That's all right. Bye, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.